Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a truly fascinating piece of medical history. We're asking one big question. Who was John Langdon Down? It's such an incredible story. We're going to explore how one man's dedicated work back in the 1800s literally laid the groundwork for modern medical science as we know it today. It's a story all about careful observation, traditional compassion, and how science slowly, steadily builds upon itself over generations.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the boy from Cornwall, then look at reforming the Earlswood Asylum and cover the first clinical description. After that, we'll talk about Normansfield and humane care, the genetic discovery, and finally, wrap up with a lasting medical legacy. It's kind of like a time-traveling journey from the 1800s straight into modern genetics.
So Section 1, the boy from Cornwall. Let's look at his early life and what actually inspired him. Where does this story actually begin? Well, John Langdon Down was born in 1828 in a small village in Cornwall. His dad was a local grocer and an apothecary, and by the time John was just 14 in 1842, he was apprenticed to his father. He was quite literally standing behind a wooden counter, counting inventory and mixing basic remedies for the villagers. That hard-working, incredibly practical background really set his entire foundation, didn't it? It absolutely did. From there, he makes his way to London in 1846 to work in a pharmaceutical laboratory. And then, following his father's passing, he makes a huge leap in 1853. He enters the London Hospital Medical School. So the young boy who started out sweeping the floor of a village shop actually ended up graduating with gold medals in medicine, surgery, and obstetrics.
But there's also a deeply personal inspiration for his career path, right? Yes, there is. When he was 18, before he even went to medical school, he got caught in a massive summer rainstorm. His family rushed into a small local cottage to take shelter, and while they were waiting out the rain, a young girl with developmental differences served them. And that brief, everyday interaction just stuck with him. It haunted him, but in the best way possible. As this quote from later in his life reveals, he kept asking himself, could nothing for her be done? That simple, relatable moment of seeking shelter from a storm sparked a lifelong, unwavering dedication to helping individuals whose society had basically forgotten.
Moving on to Section 2, reforming the Earlswood Asylum, bringing light to the classroom. In 1858, freshly graduated with his gold medals, Dr. Down takes a job as the medical superintendent at the Earlswood Asylum. Now, we have to explain what an asylum was back then. It was essentially a dark, neglected waiting room where people were just kept out of sight. The old methods were strictly custodial. We're talking physical restraint, poor hygiene, and really grim isolation. But Dr. Down wanted to change that waiting room into a bright, bustling classroom. He introduced basic, traditional, human dignity. He threw out the physical restraints entirely. He demanded that the residents have daily baths, clean clothes, fresh air, and balanced, nutritious meals. He fundamentally believed that a clean, bright, structured environment was the very first step to a good life.
And they weren't just sitting around in clean rooms all day either. This is where his belief in human potential really shines. He believed every single human being has inherent dignity and the capacity to learn useful tasks. So he set up a farm, a bakery, and workshops. They actually learned to farm, garden, clean stables, milk cows, and weave. Think of it like building with blocks. You start with simple, hands-on tasks that build confidence and character, block by block. He even organized social outings and shopping trips so they could practice interacting with the outside world. It was a completely revolutionary approach to education at the time.
All right, Section 3, the first clinical description, a 19th century medical framework. While he's doing all this incredible hands-on work, he's also observing. In 1866, he publishes a famous paper providing the very first comprehensive clinical description of the condition. But to understand it, we have to know how doctors worked back then. They used empirical measurements of physical characteristics. Okay, let's break that down. Imagine a giant, messy library filled with millions of books, but none of the books have a summary printed on the back. You have no idea what the stories inside are about. How in the world do you organize them? Well, if I can't read the summary, I guess I just group them by what they look like on the outside. You know, put all the tall red books together and all the short blue books together. That is exactly what 19th century doctors did. Before they understood genetics or what was actually inside the body, they organized patients by their physical appearance, the shape of the head, the structure of the face. They literally sorted the library by the book covers, and that is why he used the historical, geographical term Mongolism. He was just grouping physical traits based on the scientific classification systems of his day.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that he was using the most advanced science available to him at the time. That meant careful physical measurements, and he also pioneered the use of clinical photography? Wow, so he actually took photographs of his patients to document these consistent physical patterns? He sure did. He was meticulously documenting the book covers to prove that this was a specific, distinct medical condition. And because it was a specific condition, it required specific, specialized care.
Section 4. Normansfield and Humane Care. Building a home, not a hospital.
In 1868, he makes a very bold move. He and his wife, Mary Crellin, actually resigned from Earlswood to build their own institution. It was a warm, private home in Teddington called Normansfield. And the routine there was completely different from a standard hospital, wasn't it?
Oh, night and day.
Step 1 was top-tier medical care with highly individualized attention. Step 2 was continuing those practical skills we talked about, but mixed with joyful farm-based play. And Step 3 was cultural enrichment. They actually built an opulent theater right inside the home. It was this beautiful space where the residents would sing, dance, recite poetry, and act in plays. It was a completely holistic routine where healthcare seamlessly blended with pure joy and creativity.
The result of all this effort was an environment that people literally called more of a home than a home, with a capital H referring to a cold, clinical institution. The Downs created a deeply familial, inviting atmosphere. They proved with objective, measurable success that a structured, disciplined, but incredibly loving environment yields real progress and genuine happiness in individuals with developmental needs.
Moving to Section 5, the genetic discovery. Reading the instruction manual.
Dr. Down passed away in 1896, so we have to fast forward decades later to 1959 to see the next major leap in scientific capability. A French scientist named Jérôme Lejeune made a groundbreaking discovery, Trisomy 21. Okay, how do we easily explain what that actually means? Well, think of human biology like a giant instruction manual for building a person. Every single human gets a manual, and it's divided into chapters called chromosomes. Most people have 2 pages for every chapter. Trisomy 21 simply means that when this specific manual was printed, it accidentally included a 3rd duplicate page right in chapter 21.
Oh, wow! So we're turning to our library analogy from earlier. Exactly. For 100 years, doctors were sorting the library by just looking at the book covers. But in 1959, science finally learned how to open the books and read the actual text inside. That is a huge shift. The discovery of that extra 21st chromosome completely shifted medical science. We moved from organizing by physical traits to organizing by actual genetic material.
And that brings us to Section 6, a lasting medical legacy, the continuity of progress.
With this amazing new genetic understanding, the medical community had to decide how to talk about this condition moving forward. By 1961, genetic experts realized that the old 19th century geographical term was completely inaccurate based on the new genetic data. It had absolutely nothing to do with geography, it was all about chromosomes. So what did they do? They wrote an open letter to the famous medical journal, The Lancet, suggesting a change. And in 1965, the World Health Organization officially adopted the name Down syndrome. That's fascinating. They objectively updated the terminology to reflect the modern science, but they deliberately chose to preserve the historical continuity. They named it after Dr. Down to honor the man who first brought clarity and compassion to the condition a whole century earlier.
When you look back at his entire life, his legacy is just immense. He provided the very first clinical description. He pioneered the use of medical photography. He instituted completely foundational reforms that brought dignity back into asylums. And working right alongside his incredibly dedicated wife, Mary, he definitively proved that these patients were entirely capable of education and joy. He looked at individuals whom society had completely given up on, and he saw inherent potential.
And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought. Dr. Down used the absolute best tools of his time, measuring tapes and early cameras, to lay the groundwork for geneticists a century later. It really is a beautiful chain of continuous medical progress. It makes you wonder, looking at the tools we are using today, how will our current foundational science pave the way for tomorrow's greatest discoveries? It's an incredibly inspiring question. Thank you for walking us through this amazing historical journey, and thank you all for joining us on this Explainer.